12 long years, Caleb Morrison, Thorne to the few who once knew him, had chosen quiet armor. Not the jittery hush that comes from a guilty mind, but a calm earned on purpose. Out on his spread, 50 miles from the nearest storefront, the day's music was the old boards sighing in the wind and the lowing of cattle drifting across grass. He wanted nothing else. After the fire, after the family he loved became memory, and the talk in town burned worse than flames, Thorne swore a vow. No ties, no folks, no hurt. But blood tells the truth, and the smear he found on his fence post at dawn wrote a tale he didn't care to read. He spotted her from 30 feet out, a woman slumped against rough cedar, dress ripped and muddy, dark hair matted to her cheeks. Her hands pressed hard to her side, where crimson leaked through thin cloth. She hadn't seen him. Eyes shut, skin pale as frost on morning grass. He tightened his grip on the Winchester and stood still, wind tugging at his hat brim. Every learned instinct said turn around. Let her bleed. Let her pass. She didn't belong, not on his dirt, not in his life. Trouble had ridden up to Caleb Morrison before, and every time it cost him more than he could afford. 12 years alone taught him simple rules. Mind your own, keep your head down, never invite anyone close. Strangers bring loads a pack horse can't carry and drag you toward hell you can't walk out of. Then she shifted, lips parting, a thin sound slipping free. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut him. A broken, tired little whimper. Before he could talk himself out of it, he stepped forward, then again. His shadow crossed her face, and her eyes opened, green, clear despite the pain, locking on him with fear and a thin thread of hope that made his chest tighten. "Please, they're coming," she breathed. 2 words. That was all it took to smash a dozen years of peace. For over a decade, Thorne had lived like a ghost by choice. He rose with the sun, tended cattle, fixed rails, watched seasons roll like slow waves over the plains. No neighbors. No knocks at the door. No surprises. Quiet you only get when people forget you exist. He hadn't run to this exile on a whim. Back then, fire took more than wood. It seared his soul. When the ashes cooled, he was left with loss and rumors that curled around him like smoke. People whispered about his family, about what Thorne might have done, about scars on his hands and deeper ones underneath. He left before anyone could fix him with an answer. On 300 rough Texas acres, he built his stronghold, not rock walls, but distance. Distance from town. Distance from the man he had been. So when he found a woman bleeding on his cedar fence, his first instinct was the same one that kept him breathing. Turn and go. The Winchester was steady in his hands. Help her, and trouble walks in behind. He'd seen it. A stranger's mess becomes yours, and chaos doesn't care how hard you work for quiet. But as he stared from 30 feet, boots planted in dry soil, the idea of walking away tasted like ash. She pushed weakly against the post and let out that cracked sound again. It wasn't loud, but it slipped past every wall he'd stacked around his heart. Suddenly those years of hiding didn't feel brave. They felt small. He moved closer. When his shadow covered her, her green eyes met his, sharp, glassy, scared, and still stubborn. "Please," she whispered, voice scraped raw. "They're close." His gut nodded. Whoever she was, someone wanted her. If they'd chased her this far, they were near. The older version of Thorne, the soldier who could put a bullet on target at 100 yards, would have known his next move. But that man lay buried under years and ashes. This Thorne wanted no part of anyone's fight. He crouched, rifle across his knees, and took stock. Scratches striped her arms. A bruise bloomed along her jaw. A dark, wet patch spread at her ribs. She pressed both hands there like she could hold herself together. "I can't help you," he said. Rough and flat, and the words tasted bitter as soon as they left his mouth. Something flashed in her eyes. Anger, hurt, grit. "You don't understand," she said. "If they find me here, they'll kill you too." That stopped him. He looked to the horizon. A faint smear of dust moved fast in the distance. Riders. His fingers tightened. He could point her to water and send her on. But another voice, quiet and old, spoke up. "And when they find her dying on the trail, when they backtrack and see she came here, He'd worked too hard for peace, but staring at her desperate eyes, he knew a truth he didn't want. He might not get to choose anymore. Thorne had always told himself trouble didn't come this far out. His ranch, tucked on 300 tough acres, was as far off the path as a man could get. He liked it that way. Out here, no law came calling. No neighbor asked questions about his past. But fences don't stop the right kind of storm. He crouched again, studying her face. Cuts, dust, darker smudges. Blood soaking the dress under her ribs. "Name?" he asked. Her eyes lifted, sharp despite the hurt. "Sarah. Eliza Whitmore." "You're a long way from anything Miss Caldwell," he said by habit, misnaming her through the haze of worry and habit. She tried to shift and winced. "Not far enough," she hissed. "They're still coming." "Who?" he asked, glancing south. On the horizon, a light dust haze swelled, blown by a steady wind. "Men from Dead Rock Canyon," she said. 3 or 4. "Been tracking me since yesterday. Dead Rock Canyon." The name landed heavy. A mining camp 40 miles south, silver veins, no law worth mentioning. A place where no one asked about your past if you kept your mouth shut and didn't anger the wrong hands. "What did you do?" The question came sharper than he meant. Her eyes cut to him. "What makes you think I did anything?" "Because folks who are innocent don't usually end up bleeding at my fence with killers behind them." For a breath, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then her shoulders sank, and she spoke almost without sound. "I saw them do it," she said. "The Whitakers. A whole family. They had a silver claim near the canyon. Worth killing for. I was there for supplies. Wrong place. Wrong time." He watched her, reading the little signs he'd learned in another life. Her eyes didn't dart. The shake in her voice sounded like shock, not lies. "So you ran," he said. "What else should I have done?" she rasped. "Stay, so they could make sure the only witness never speaks." Her voice cracked. "They killed a mother, a father, and their little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8. You think they'd blink before killing one more?" The plains delivered a far-off sound then. Hoofbeats, faint but sure. Thorne stood, stomach knotted, rifle ready. On the far ridge, a rising plume of dust marked fast riders. For, like she'd said, she braced herself on the fence and tried to stand. "Please," she whispered, desperate. "I won't cause you trouble. Point me to water. I'll keep moving." But his mind had already started to work. For armed men, hard enough to wash away their sins with blood. If they'd killed a family over rock and metal, they'd kill again. And now that they'd chased her to his gate, he was in it whether he liked it or not. The hoofbeats grew louder. 10 minutes, maybe less, and they'd top the rise and spot the ranch. He'd spent 12 years dodging other folks' fights. Yet with a rifle firm in his hands, the heavy truth settled in. There was no walking this one off. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded, weak, clinging to the post. "Hope more than strength." "Then move," he said. "You and I are about to get mighty familiar with my root-cellar." The choice was made, and the storm rolled closer. The ranch felt wrong, too still, the air holding its breath. Thorne stood by the window with a Winchester, eyes on the ridge, as 4 riders broke the skyline through. Dust and early light. They spread out like wolves, calm, trained, deadly. It didn't matter that he'd invited no one. It didn't matter that, for a dozen years, he'd kept his head down, mended boards, and tried to forget the man he used to be. Trouble had found him, riding hard. Below the floorboards, in the tight root-cellar, Eliza Whitmore crouched in the dark. She'd cleaned her wound with what he left, fresh bandage, wrapped snug, but blood still stained through. When he'd lowered the trap door, their eyes met, green, scared, but steady. "They're coming," she'd whispered before. Now, they were here. The leader, a tall man, with a jagged scar from ear to jaw, pulled up his horse 50 yards from the porch. Even at that distance, Thorne could read the cold math in his gaze. A gunman's stare. "Whitmore," the scarred man called, voice flat as a shovel blade, carrying across dry air. Thorne stepped onto the porch, rifle low, but ready. "Depends who's asking." "Luther Blackwell," the man said. "We're tracking a woman. Dangerous criminal. You seen anyone come through?" Thorne's jaw hardened. The lie rolled out smooth from years of practice. Ain't seen a soul in weeks, he drawled. Gets lonely. Suits me fine. Blackwell dismounted with the easy move of a man who can kill sitting down or standing up. Boots scraped dirt as he walked, hand resting light on the butt of his Colt. Funny thing, he said, eyes sliding to the fence post with dried blood. We followed her to your line. Blood trail, too. She was hurt bad. Could be coyote, Thorne said flatly. They run through regular. Blackwell smiled without warmth. Mind if we look around? Ease my worry. Thorne's finger found the Winchester's curve. I'd rather you didn't. Wasn't asking, Blackwell said. His smile vanished. Behind him, the other three shifted in their saddles and spread in a slow, practiced fan. Thorne pulled a breath. He tried to avoid this. But when Blackwell put a boot on his steps without permission, something in Thorne snapped. 12 years of silence cracked like thin ice. The first shot split the air. One of Blackwell's men dropped before he even cleared leather. Chaos blew open. Blackwell dove behind his horse, pistol flashing, splinters leaping from the porch rail. The other two scrambled, one behind the water trough, the other at the barn wall. Below, Sarah heard the gunfire, jaw tight. She couldn't crouch in the dark while the man who'd helped her fought alone. Ignoring the pain, she eased the trap, climbed out, and grabbed Thorne's spare Colt. Down, Thorne barked, but she'd already slid to the post near him. They killed a little girl, she hissed. Sarah Whitaker ate. I won't hide. Blackwell's voice rang out from behind his horse. Wrong side, Whitmore. All this for a woman you don't even know. Thorne didn't answer. He snapped the lever, chambered another round. This had become bigger than one woman. It was about the Whitaker family, about a kind of right he'd promised he'd never be forced to chase again. Bullets chewed porch boards. Thorne rolled behind a thick bench he'd built for quiet evenings that would never come now. Ammo, he asked. 5 in the gun, she said. Maybe 6 on your belt. You. 3 in the rifle, he said. Too light for a straight trade. Plan. Something dumb, he muttered, eyeing the barn. 30 yards of open ground where a careless man could die. Inside sat a crate of old mining dynamite. Temperamental. Dangerous. Maybe enough. Can you hold them 2 minutes? For that little girl, she said, eyes bright. Yes. Thorne dashed from the porch as Sarah's Colt cracked in steady rhythm, forcing Blackwell's men to duck. Bullets sang past his head, close enough to feel their heat. He threw himself through the barn door as a slug ripped the frame behind his shoulder. Heart hammering, he tore open the crate and grabbed 2 sticks. His hands shook as he thumbed a match and kissed fire to the first fuse. 20 seconds. Maybe less. Outside, Sarah's shot slowed. Reloading or hit. Hold on, Thorne said to no one, lit the second fuse, and hurled the first stick toward the trough where one man hid. The blast ripped the morning wide open. Dirt and splinters flew, and the trough went to pieces. When the smoke drifted, one man lay still, the other crawled bleeding. Blackwell used the chaos to close in. By the time Thorne stepped from the barn, Blackwell had Sarah at gunpoint, steel pressed to her temple. Drop it, Whitmore, he snarled. Now or. She paints your steps. Thorne froze, rifle halfway to shoulder. 30 feet. Too far to beat a trigger pull. Don't, Sarah said, quiet and fierce. Don't let him win. Thorne's jaw set. You're right, he said, and pitched the second lit stick. It rolled to a stop at Blackwell's boots, few spitting. Blackwell's eyes went wide. He had 3 seconds to pick, shoot her, or dive. He chose wrong. The blast lifted him and threw his gun aside, the shock rolling across the yard like thunder. When the ringing faded, the ranch was still. Blackwell lay broken near the steps. The last man was gone, probably running for Dead Rock Canyon. Thorne lowered the rifle and turned to Sarah. She was white-faced, bloodied, alive. Is it done? She whispered. He looked at the wrecked porch, the smoking hole where the trough had been, the stained dirt that had known only quiet for 12 years. Yeah, he said at last. It's done. The sun slid low over the Texas plain, pouring orange over fence lines and long grass. For the first time in 12 years, Thorne wasn't by himself. He sat on the half-fixed steps with a hammer by his side, hands dusty with wood and a faint shine of oil. Next to him, Eliza Whitmore held a tin cup, green eyes watching the horizon. Fresh bandages wrapped her ribs, and she moved carefully, like sudden motion might split open the wound or the past. They said nothing for a long stretch. Two calves butted heads under their mother's eye. Beyond them, land unrolled forever, the wind whispering through grass. 6 months ago, Sarah said finally, voice low, I didn't think I'd see another sunrise. I thought I'd die in the dirt with those men running me down. Thorne's fingers tightened around the cup. He remembered finding her slumped at the fence, dress torn, blood on her side, and the way every old rule screamed at him to stay out. He hadn't. 6 months ago, he said, I thought I'd buried the part of me that cared. She turned, catching the last light in her eyes. And now, he looked out at the familiar lines of pasture, softened by dusk. He breathed out slow. Now I wonder how I ever called this place peaceful. She smiled a little. You had quiet, she said. You didn't have life. He didn't answer quick. For a dozen years, this ranch had been both fort and cell. After the fire that took his family, after the hard words that followed him like coyotes, he came here to vanish. He chose solitude to keep others safe and keep himself from breaking. But solitude hadn't saved him. The woman beside him, stumbling into his world like a wounded doe, made him remember how to feel. 3 days after the gunfight, Sheriff Whitaker rode in from Dead Rock with a posse. He listened while Thorne laid out what happened, studied the bodies of Luther Blackwell and his men, then nodded as Sarah gave her account of the massacre. Will you swear in court? Morrison asked her. Every word, she said without pause. The Whitaker family deserves that. Thorne watched the steel in her voice despite the pain in her ribs. She wasn't just surviving. She was fighting for a thing that mattered, the truth, and a little girl named Sarah Whitaker who wouldn't see 9. When the sheriff and his men left, hauling Blackwell's gang away, the ranch felt changed. For years, this land had been his safe place. Now it felt like something else too, a place where wrong could be answered, where broken people might start amend. You could leave, Thorne said one evening, breaking a long silence. Sarah looked at him, brow creasing. Morrison offered Denver, he went on. Start fresh. No one there knows your name. She was quiet a long time, staring at the wide sky like it might hold a map. And you, she asked, what do you do? He glanced at his hands. Same as ever, he said. Work the herd. Fix what's broke. Keep the place standing. A small smile tugged his mouth. Though, seems to me, this ranch could use a woman's touch. Maybe another set of hands. She raised a brow. Offer me a job, Caleb Morrison? He met her eyes straight, maybe for the first time in years, without looking away. Offering you a home. The smile that spread across her face felt like daybreak after a long night. Half a year later, travelers told of a quiet spread where a scarred man and a green-eyed woman built something good out of ashes. They raised cattle, then children. They fed strangers and never spoke about the day a streak of blood on a fence changed everything. Thorne kept the Winchester cleaned and within reach, but never had to shoulder it again. Some fights, once settled, stay settled. Some peace, once earned, holds. There are times we think our book is already written, that loss and mistakes lock us into a page we can't turn. Caleb Morrison believed his story was finished. After grief and blame, he chose to vanish, telling himself the world had nothing left for him but quiet chores and an empty porch. Then a hurt stranger collapsed against his fence and upturned the ending. This story reminds us of something simple and deep. It's not too late to open your door to someone in need, and in doing that, to find the parts of yourself you thought burned away. Thorne didn't only pull Eliza Whitmore out of danger. In helping her, he hauled himself back to life. As years gather, many of us feel the pull of being alone. The world moves fast and loud, and it's easy to shut the gate to protect the thin peace we've made. But quiet without connection can hollow a person out. Thorne's journey shows that even later in life, we can discover purpose by choosing kindness, even when it shakes our safe routine. This isn't soft talk. Compassion takes grit. Letting someone into your world, a neighbor, an old friend, a stranger, can mess with your habits and kick up old pain. But it can also bring healing where you thought nothing could grow. For those blessed with long lives, there's wisdom here. Second chances aren't only for the young. At any age, we can step out from behind our fences and let others in. Sometimes that means reaching out. Sometimes it means letting someone steady us. Maybe that's the finest thing Caleb Morrison teaches. The rails we build around our hearts keep out danger, sure, but they also keep out life. Real peace isn't found in perfect silence. It's found in connection, in brave choices, and in the will to stand for something bigger than our own hurt.